Okay, I'm going live on Facebook. I'm gonna share now our video here.
EJ, I cannot hear music, background music. EJ, we cannot hear background music.
Go ahead, Tomiko-san.
Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you might be. Welcome to the International Leadership Conference. The theme of this session is about faith-based organizations, peace initiative. On the theme, toward peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, the role of faith leaders in track 2 diplomacy. In this session, the panelists will be focused on the role of faith leaders and faith-based organizations in encouraging various forms of people-to-people engagement as a track 2 and track 3 approach to peace, and addresses issues of concern over current living conditions and humanitarian needs in North Korea. Let us listen to their ideas, suggestions, and years of experience for our future cooperation in the challenges we face in the Korean divide. There is a chat and also Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we would like to encourage listeners to send us questions. Let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Thomas Ward, President and Professor of Peace and Development at the Unification Theological Seminary. Over the course of his career, Dr. Ward has traveled between the United States and Korea more than 100 times, and he has visited North Korea twice, where he met with North Korean officials, including North Korea's founding leader, Kim Il-sung. In 1992, Dr. Ward played a significant role in an important Track 2 Peace initiative inspired and supported by Reverend Sam Myung-moon and Dr. Hak Jae-moon, which led to the unprecedented decision by North Korea to suspend its annual Hate American Month, observed each year from June 25 to July 27. Dr. Ward has written numerous articles on North Korean issues in general, so to various newspapers and magazines. Let us welcome Dr. Thomas Ward. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Duggan, and greetings to all of those who join us this afternoon. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to share with everyone today. I'd like to just say a couple more things about myself so that you understand the context in which I'm delivering my presentation today. Yes, I am the president of a seminary, and yes, I have been seminary educated, but I have spent most of my academic career more in the area of public and international affairs. And I actually oversaw for 12 years until 2018, several graduate level programs which interfaced with the United Nations. And I probably have about 20 current employees at the UN who were formerly my students, actually. So I speak more this afternoon from that perspective than maybe from the typical religious perspective. I'd like to, basically, I feel that my investment here is probably best in those areas. I'm going to use some slides with my PowerPoint here. So I'd like to start now. And my focus is the role of Track 2 diplomacy in Korean reunification. Why would this not be moving? Okay, 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, when we study about diplomacy, we know that there's what's referred to as multi-track diplomacy. And within that, you have Track 1 diplomacy, also something called Track 1.5 diplomacy, which we don't have time to speak about today, Track 2 diplomacy, and Track 3 diplomacy. Track 2 diplomacy normally involves officials, oftentimes former heads of state, former congressmen, former senators, former ministers of government. And also it can involve Archbishop Stallings, it can involve former major religious leaders, even current religious leaders. And it can also involve academics, actually, all of these areas. Track 3 diplomacy is more people-to-people diplomacy. Usually Track 2 diplomacy has a specific targeted aim for why it is being conducted, if you will. So I just wanted to clarify that to start. In the text, Taming Intractable Conflicts, Mediation in the Hardest Cases, a text which was produced by the United States Institute of Peace, it talks about the role of one particular religious community known as the community of Saint Egidio, which is located in Rome, which has played a very important role in mediating a number of conflicts, probably the most important of those conflicts being the civil war that was occurring in Mozambique between Frelimo, which was more a leftist leading group, and Renamo, which was more a right leading group. And amazingly, there were all kinds of proposals. Well, maybe Portugal can come in and help to settle this disagreement. Why don't we send in the United Nations? But these two divided factions, left and right, the only group that they both trusted was the community of Saint Egidio, which had conducted a whole variety of social services, taking care of children, providing food, helping the needy. And for that reason, they had gained the confidence of both sides. So the amazing thing is that for the first time in the history of this community, it served as the facilitator to bring about what resulted in peace between these two warring factions of Renamo and Frelimo. And that was a peace that lasted for 25 years. I apologize, I'm having a little bit. I really don't know what's going on here. This is very unusual. No. EJ, for some reason, there is not a thing on the bottom here for me to be able to focus on just one slide.
Dr. Ward, try again. Can you launch again your PowerPoint?
No, it's not working. I don't know what the problem is. Well, how can I do this? I think what I'm going to have to do, okay. All right, well, let me just continue. Basically, Saint Egidio was capable to broker a peace between these two warring forces. And will you be the person I asked to move each slide, EJ?
Sure.
Okay, why don't I just do that then? All right. So the community of Saint Egidio turned out to be the ones who indeed brokered this peace. And since that time, they have been called on numerous occasions also to help to broker peace. Next slide, please. For example, very recently, they played a major role in terms of settling a civil war which was going on in South Sudan. By the way, the Universal Peace Federation also played an important role in that conflict. But Saint Egidio, it kind of shows the potential. There must be at least 15 different conflicts which have taken place in Africa over the past 25 years, where the community of Saint Egidio has played a central role in helping to facilitate conflict resolution. Next slide, please. And I believe that in the case of Korea, I believe that the Universal Peace Federation also can play an important role in terms of helping to resolve the conflict. Let me make an observation here, however, so that things can be completely clear. Diplomacy does not always result in the injustice. Diplomacy ends conflict. It doesn't always result in justice. So what I'm focusing upon here is actually what do we do to try to address the issues of conflict? The topic of justice, I think, may be addressed by some of the other speakers, but my focus here is conflict resolution. Many of you might be aware that after the first meeting which took place between US President Donald Trump and DPRK, North Korean President Kim Jong-un, the consequence of that meeting was the decision that they would cancel Hate America Month. Next slide, please. But I want you all to know that that was not the first time that Hate America Month, which takes place every year in North Korea between June 25th and July 27th, that was not the first time that that transpired. The first time that that actually happened was all the way back in 1992. And I want to talk particularly about that in the remainder of the time that I have. Next slide, please. In December of 1991, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who had been condemned to death by the DPRK following the division of Korea into North and South, who had spent 3 years in a labor camp, who had been subjected to severe torturing on more than one occasion, and for a whole variety of reasons had every reason to be upset and to hold incredible resentment towards President Kim Il-sung. But he felt that the most important thing, the most important role that he could play was to try to be a facilitator of peace. Therefore, he traveled to North Korea in December of 1991. And the amazing thing, there's a film, you can see it on YouTube. If you see the film, you'll see that when Reverend Moon sees Kim Il-sung for the first time, he rushes to him and he embraces him. Not a cold handshake, nothing like that. He rushes to him and he embraces him. And he calls him, in Korean, there's the term hyungnim, which means elder brother. He refers to him as his elder brother. And an incredible tie was brought at that time. Next slide, please. Next slide. He was permitted at that time to return to his home in North Korea to visit with members of his family. And a whole variety of meetings and ties developed between the UPF founder and the government of the Democratic Republic of Korea. Next slide, please. This was further sealed, if you will, by an interview which was arranged through that first visit with the Washington Times on the 15th of April, 1992. This was the first time for decades that Kim Il-sung had spoken before the American press. And he was very pleased with this coverage because the interview was not edited. It was shared exactly as he had spoken it. And there was an additional piece that also followed. Next slide, please. In June of 1992, the American Freedom Coalition went with a delegation to visit North Korea. These were all former US officials. And the focus of this particular meeting was to somehow reduce nasty rhetoric between the United States and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. On the left, you have Congressman Richard Eichord, who was the head of our delegation. And behind him, you have Governor David Cargo, the former governor of New Mexico. To the right of Kim Il-sung, you see a very tall man. That's Bob Mathias, two-time decathlon champ, and for about 20 years, a member of US Congress. All the way straight to the back of that room, you'll see a man with red hair and glasses. You can't see his face too clearly. That's actually Mr. Larry Moffett, who's with us today. And we were both witness to this phenomenal event. Next slide, please. I had the opportunity to meet with President Kim Il-sung. This was not special. Every one of us who attended, we had this picture. Mr. Larry Moffett can show you his photo sometime if you'd like to see it as well. But what I did have as a unique opportunity for myself was at the end of the event, the purpose was to deal with this issue of rhetoric. And at the very end of the event, as we were getting ready to get into the plane to go to travel back to the United States, the head of our delegation, Congressman Richard Eichord, turned to me and said, "Tom, the job isn't done here. You have to stay." And I thought, stay? You know, I couldn't say that, but I thought, wow, stay in North Korea? That's incredible, you know. But I did stay, and it was a very rewarding experience for me. I had a chance to meet with many of the officials there to discuss and to spend an entire week working on this particular project. Next slide, please. And at the end of our meeting, I left. About a week later, I left and I returned to the United States. And we had tried to put together a communique during this week, but it was not a successful communique. It didn't happen. I was told by the Foreign Ministry that the Foreign Ministry liked my communique, but the Ministry of Information did not like my communique. And so for that reason, therefore, it was not going to be released. But they said, we will do something. And on the 23rd of June, I received a phone call from the North Korean ambassador to the United Nations. And he asked that myself and Congressman Eichord, we meet with him the next day. And we did meet with him, and it was a phenomenal meeting because he explained to us that Kim Il-sung was very moved, first of all, by Dr. Sun Myung and Hak Jae-han Moon's visit to the DPRK in November. Secondly, he was moved that he could objectively be treated by the Washington Times through his interview. And thirdly, he was appreciative of the visit of all of these former US officials to Korea. And he said to us, the ambassador, President Kim Il-sung felt he has to do something. And he said, this is what we're going to do. Every year from June 25th until July 27th, we have Hate America Month. But this year, for the first time ever, we are going to cancel it. And then he said, I am sharing this with you, Congressman Eichord. I should share this with Ambassador James Lilly in Beijing, China. But I'm sharing it with you because I want to make sure that the United States government understands that we are appreciative to Reverend Moon for what he's done. And I want him to get the credit for this particular step. So that's exactly what did transpire. Congressman Eichord was the messenger who spoke to National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft and who also spoke with President George Bush about this decision by the DPRK government. Next. After that period of time, there were other things which also transpired between Reverend Moon and the DPRK. Next, please. Next one, please. Next, please. The Little Angels, the cultural troupe of Reverend Moon, traveled to North Korea, and North Korea sent their troop to South Korea. Next, please. We established an automobile factory in North Korea. Next, please. We established a hotel there to invite tourists. Next, please. In 1994, when Kim Il-sung passed, Dr. Bo Hee-pak, the chief representative of Reverend Moon, traveled to North Korea for that event. Next, please. On the 10th anniversary of the Moon's visit to Korea, Dr. Peter Kim, who was then serving as the representative of Reverend Moon, visited to North Korea. Next, please. And I don't have time for, next please. Sorry, we don't have time. The Bush administration says that the secret link to North Korea is Dr. Dongmoon Ju of the Washington Times. Next, please. It says that, it talks there about track 2 diplomacy and says one of the track 2 intermediaries, however, turns out to be an unexpected candidate. Douglas Dongmoon Ju, a 66-year-old businessman, chairman of the Washington Times newspaper, and a high-ranking associate of the Unification Church of the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. You can read it online, February 7, 2012. Reverend Moon talked about the ultimate victory of love. Next, please. And after he passed on the 3rd of September 2012. Next, please. And following that, he was recognized by the DPR government. This particular flower on the right side in Hangul, it says Kim Jong-un, and on the right it says Moon Sun-myung Jung-jae Song-seng, which means president, basically President Moon Sun-myung. Next, please. And he was given an award. He was called a hero of unification. He was recognized by the North Korean government for all of his efforts towards reunification. Next, please. And he worked hard, and he said that it was important not just to forgive and love enemies, but you should really work so hard that your former enemy comes to recognize that love. And I really feel that this September 5th event was a recognition of that. Another thing that's said sometimes is that Reverend, you see, he's holding Kim Il-sung's hand. When Reverend Moon takes the hand of someone, he never lets it go. Next, please. And that's also true for Dr. Hak Ja-han Moon. Next, please. I'm very sure going forward that she's also going to play a very, very important role in terms of addressing the issues on the Korean Peninsula. There's a long track record that people have to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ward. Thank you. Anyway, for the track 2 diplomacy, you mentioned that to really, it's a key is to build human trust, the human trust between, to become true facilitator to bring a peace. Thank you very much. Thank you. So our second speaker is the president, of course, our this one of sponsoring organization and the project head of project of IAPD. It's a faith-based organization. Archbishop George Augustus Stallings Jr. He is the founder of the Imani Temple African American Catholic Congregation. He is, of course, national chairman of the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, North America. He earned 3 degrees from the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. He was a pastor of St. Teresa of Avila Parish in Washington for 14 years. And during his pastorate, the parish became known for its integration of African American culture and gospel music in the Mass. Welcome. The floor is yours, Archbishop Stallings.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tomiko Duggan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our participants on this program that is a part of the International Leadership Conference and our particular segment today of the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, of which I have the honor, the privilege of serving as its North American chairman. Even more so, having served, as Mrs. Duggan said, as an executive member of the American Clergy Leadership Conference, which is a broad-based coalition of Christian ministers in the United States of America focused on rebuilding the family, restoring the community, and renewing the nation and the world. And here for the past 2 years, I've had the distinct honor and privilege of serving as the chairman of the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, which encompasses all the religious faith traditions in our world today. And I'm excited about that opportunity because for the past 20 plus years, I have been engaging in soft power diplomacy, which has involved both, as thank God for Dr. Thomas Ward for giving us a better understanding of track 1, track 2, and track 3 diplomacy, because as a religious leader, I have very much been involved along with countless thousands of religious leaders around the world engaged in soft power diplomacy track 2, as well as track 3 diplomacy, people to people engagement. And I am very much motivated by my own direct engagement and interaction with Koreans, not only Korean Americans, but Koreans themselves, having visited the land of the morning calm in South Korea for some 50 plus times in that short span of 21 years, having visited the 38th parallel, the geographical dividing line between North and South Korea, and having the opportunity to come to know the Korean family, the Peninsula family, during that period of time. And my heart goes out to our brothers and sisters in both North and South Korea. And I think that's how we have to look at it in the context of being one global, universal family under God. I'm motivated by the words of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And many of you are familiar with his letter from Birmingham jail in April of 1963 and addressing the concerns of white, mostly Protestant pastors and ministers who were concerned about Martin's apparent interference with the affairs going on in Birmingham, Alabama. And Martin penned these words from that Birmingham jail that not only applied to all of us, but it really hits at the heart of what is going on, the tension, the conflict between North and South Korea, because we have a tendency to somehow distance ourselves or somehow see this as a matter of no interest or little interest to any of us, because many of us are in America, for example. I speak from the vantage point of being an American, being a proud American, and celebrating freedom, justice, and equality in our nation, even though we have so much work to do. And I look at North and South Korea in a way that is not distant, that's their concern, that's their issue, that's their problem, but I look at it very personally, that these are my brothers, these are my sisters who are living in conflict, who have members of both families, biological members on both North and South Korea. That this land that is ironically called the land of the morning calm is anything but that when it comes to that relationship between North and South Koreans, yet they are one family. And so the words of King that really inspired me to engage as a religious leader along with other religious leaders and to work towards the reunification of the Korean Peninsula, taking a soft power diplomacy approach, as well as third soft power approach, people to people engagement, are these words. King wrote these words. I know you're waiting to hear them because I've led up to them for 1 minute. These words from King. He says, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men and women are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. And so we have to be concerned about what's going on the Korean Peninsula. We have to work towards a reunification. I, as a Christian minister, I, as a pastor, believe in the power of prayer. We've heard the classic definition about prayer. Prayer changes things. I truly believe that. But there's something greater that prayer can accomplish. Not only can prayer change things, Dr. Thomas Ward, but prayer can change people so that people can change things. We know that from the very beginning, it was God's original plan or ideal or intention that humanity live as one, not live in division. What would such a world look like? It would be a world that would reflect and manifest the oneness of God in substantial form. And that is what we are called to do as citizens of the world, one global family. We are called to reflect and to manifest the presence of God that dwells within each and every one of us. Have we ever thought of it in that light? That in North as well as in South Korea, there are persons created in the image and likeness of God, as each one of us has been, and that in each one of them resides the essence of God. And that God desires that those who possess the Spirit of God would live in a manner that speaks of unity. In Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, Dr. Schulte, in Ephesus, in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, one particular translation states, make every effort to preserve the unity that has the Spirit as its origin and peace as its binding force. We know that peace is a choice. It's a choice that we must make in our everyday lives. We must choose peace over conflict, peace over injustice, peace over hostility, enmity, and strife. It is in our hands to make the difference. And that is why we leave that track one, or hard power diplomacy, to the politicians, to the heads of state, to their legislative and judicial branches. That is why we leave track one, hard power diplomacy, to military, even though we know that neither politicians nor the military will be able to bring the kind of true and lasting peace that is needed on the Korean Peninsula. So we as clergy, men and women, particularly those of the Abrahamic faith traditions, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, we must work together to bring about another means by which peace can be achieved, even if we look at it from an ancillary or a handmaiden type of position. We must use all the tools that are in our storehouse to work towards peace. We use those theological virtues. Dr. Ward knows about those three theological virtues that we learn about in Roman Catholicism. Faith, the three theological virtues are faith, hope, and love. Faith, we must believe that there is one God, and that one God is not only creator, but that God is the heavenly parent of all humankind. Our hope is that humanity can work together to establish a world of true and lasting peace, and that love, that supreme virtue of love that binds us together and allows us to see and embrace the divine within each and every one of us. Our challenge today is to become true leaders in the world. John Maxwell, the guru of leadership, on the subject of leadership, says very clearly, leadership is simply influence. I believe that as a religious leader, as a conduit, as a medium, as that connecting point between God and humanity, that I have been called and chosen, as other religious leaders have been, to work towards the oneness in humanity that is reflected in the essence of God, and that we can utilize our divine strength, giftedness, and talents to assist those who are engaging in track one diplomacy through our track two and track three efforts, that we can truly bring about this world of true and lasting peace and centering on the Korean Peninsula. I know that we looked at the Korean War that took place from 1950 to 1953, and to see what has happened in that country, to look in the South and see the tremendous development that has taken place in that nation is phenomenal. In 60 years, look what has happened since the ending of the Korean War. We want that same prosperity to be experienced by our brothers and sisters in the North. It is possible. It is achievable. The famous philosopher and theologian, the American by the name of Norman Vincent Peale, said, what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. We have to think it. We have to think unity. Think it, think it. Think unity about North and South Korea. Make it truly the land of the morning calm. I want us to imagine that. I want us to imagine what will peace look like. And I want to close out with the words, those words from that beautiful song by one of the great Beatles, John Lennon, who talked about imagine. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion to. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for hunger, no need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. May North and South Korea become truly the land of the morning calm. And may we see the reunification of North and South Korea in our day. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, Archbishop Starrings Jr. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Your last song reminds me, do you know what's happening in Tokyo? It's Olympics.
Exactly.
The song of Imagine was sung and then shared
Really?
with people, all European Olympians. That reminds me,
I
we
did not
are
realize
truly one family under God. It's really
family.
possible through one role for them Olympians, but for us, the centering on true love. So
Yes.
thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Starrings, thank you. Our third speaker, I'm happy to introduce Mr. Frank Spanier. Frank was born in Tehran, Iran in 1961. In his family is a great Iranian celebrity actor, comedian, producer, and director, Mansour Spanier. So under these circumstances, his parents, and his brother were sent to the United States to study in 1976. However, after the revolution in 1979, they had to remain in America. Frank graduated from Glendale College to get his degree. He also decided to study theology and comparative religion, so he could one day try to unite humanity by bringing bridges of understanding between different cultures and religions with love and compassion for our Creator, God Almighty. The floor is yours, Frank.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, my dear respected brothers and sisters. It is a great honor and a privilege for me to be here with you once again. I highly appreciate that. Just wanted to mention to everyone that I believe that the only solution to the North Korean humanitarian crisis is unification. The only solution for North Korean economic crisis is unification. And we all heard and we all know that Reverend Moon, peace be upon him, who passed away, and Mrs. Moon, they both have already gone there decades ago, who went there to North Korea, and they actually laid the foundation already. The seeds have been planted already. And after 20 years or so now, that we've been waiting, trying to build bridges of understanding, build bridges between North and South. Now it's our turn to go in and capitalize on what was already there. As I mentioned, the seed has already been planted by Blessed Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon. So now this tree has already grown. it's beginning to get ready to bear some fruits and flowers. And I hope by the grace of God Almighty, we, the followers of Reverend Moon, the organization, Universal Peace Federation, the leaders around the world who are trying to unite North and South Korea, they can pretty much get together through the common values that we all share and continue to put our effort to hopefully, eventually, and ultimately reach unification by the grace of God. As I mentioned in my last meeting that I had with you last week, I do believe that unification is inevitable. As I mentioned, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when it's going to happen. And this great opportunity that's available and the significant role that the Universal Peace Federation and their followers and also all the leaders can play to hopefully snowball this issue and ultimately reach our unification that we're looking for. As you probably mostly know already, that if by the grace of the Lord, the unification does take place, it will give birth to a new super Korean peninsula. And this new super Korean peninsula can be a beacon of hope for East Asia. And perhaps it can give birth to an Asian Union. As we all saw in the 90s, when Germany was united, it gave birth to gave birth to a European Union. That is actually a great opportunity for us to look into and find out the pathways that Germany took for unification. It's a very good model that can be used for us. And if we are able to do that and hopefully be able to bring about unification by the grace of God, it will definitely result in economic development. It will result in the rising of living standards for the Korean people. They will be more prosperous. So as far as the method of unification, I can pretty much put it in a few steps, which I think sounds very legitimate. Obviously, it is excellent idea that Dr. Ward and University Peace Federation have been working very hard with the United Nations. So I believe that one of the first steps is to continue our effort with United Nations and making sure that this issue is at the very highest priority level, and we have to have dialogue and engagement with the people at the UN. The other aspect obviously would be to establish our allies, to work with Japan, US, European Union, and establish our allies and have them to help us with putting the effort for the pathway towards the unification. As I mentioned, we can use the Germany model, which is already available, and it has become absolutely very, very successful. With respect to that, we have to keep continuing our civic engagement, our political engagement, our grassroots engagement, social media engagement. As I mentioned in the last meeting, our media department needs to be very vocal and very visible and kind of make some noises and bring some attention to this issue. And I believe that the role of the faith leaders and the faith organizations, if we all continue to work together and ask God Almighty to help us achieve our goal in our lifetime, it will definitely be a blessing. It will definitely be a continuous blessing until the hereafter. So it is a real honor and it's a real pleasure for me to be able to be a part of this organization, part of this team effort to hopefully try to establish this great Korean Democratic Republic to succeed. As it was mentioned already, in the past 60, 70 years, South Korea has been an excellent example and a role model for the rest of East Asia to look at and to see how great the Korean people have been as far as their culture, as far as their faith, as far as their economic growth, and so forth and so on. So I believe we are going towards the right direction. We are stepping towards proper unification. I think that it's important that perhaps we can also develop an app, which is called North and South Korean Unification App. And what this app would do, it would invite millions and millions of people from North and South to come into the app and get engaged. Because one of the most important steps of engagement is dialogue, that we need to be involved in having people with people, kind of as it was mentioned, track 3 diplomacy is kind of where I come in and where I'm interested in. And this is one of the reasons for the past couple decades I've been involved in the television programs in order to try to unite the people. Programs such as Peacemakers, programs such as Invitation to Peace. These programs were developed by me and Mr. Nasser Zomorod, who is a great man who invited me to Universal Peace Federation back in 2007 and helped me to become an ambassador of peace in 2008. He already knows that we have put together dozens of programs together that we shared with the Persian, Iranian, American community. Iranians are also multicultural. They're Muslims, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and so forth and so on. So it's a very multicultural society. So I think that if we put that app together and try to bring some attention to this issue of the border of North and South, and that by the grace of God, I truly believe that this is absolutely achievable. As it was mentioned by a great scholar in Japan, if we all follow the path of righteousness, we will have a peaceful world. Thank you very much. God bless you, and I highly appreciate the invitation.
Frank, sorry, I mute myself. Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. Frank, thank you so much giving us many ideas, and then your involvement as a peacemaker, peace filmmaker, and together with our local representatives in LA. Thank you so much. And especially, you know, our Dr. Ward is also professor of peace and development. He is developing a very interesting class at his seminary, theological seminary. I'd like to really also emphasize there's many ways that way to work together. So our final but not wonderful speaker, I'd like to introduce Dr. Susanna Schulte. Dr. Schulte is a world-leading policy expert and an activist regarding the North Korean human rights movement. I'm very, very honored to have her. She has spent over 2 decades promoting the freedom and dignity of North Korean people, and is currently, she is the president of the Defense Forum Foundation, a non-profit foundation promoting a strong national defense and freedom, democracy, and human rights abroad. She is also chairman of the Free North Korea Radio, U.S. Western Sahara Foundation, and North Korea Freedom Coalition. She's also holding vice co-chairman of the U.S. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Welcome, Dr. Schulte. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with these distinguished gentlemen. And Tomiko, thanks for inviting me. You asked me to speak about the information, the work to get information into North Korea. And I want to just echo some of the comments that have been made earlier. I'm always asked, when is the regime going to collapse? And we always say tomorrow, because I think it is inevitable, as was pointed out earlier. Unification is inevitable. It's going to happen. And I wanted to tell you how we're working to try to make that happen peaceful. Just want to emphasize that peaceful unification through the spreading of information. And the defectors that I work with, our motto is the truth will set them free. We absolutely believe that getting the truth to the people of North Korea is the key to bringing about peaceful unification. Explaining to them that the United States, for example, is not their enemy. Explaining to them that South Korea is actually a very prosperous and very well respected republic that's a leader in the world. And so I wanted to go through real quickly. Tamika asked me to talk about some of the methods that we're using. So I'm going to give you kind of a crash course in the things that we're doing. And she also wanted me to talk about some of the obstacles we're facing. We're facing a very serious obstacle from the current government in South Korea, which is a bit shocking, but the Moon administration is trying to stop everything we're doing. So let me go through real quickly. We're trying to reach the people in North Korea by land, air, and sea. And I think that the most important things that people in the free world can do is to partner with the North Korean defectors. The reason why I say that is, number one, they know how to get information in, and number two, they know how to reach people in North Korea, how to explain things to people in North Korea. So some of the methods that we're using are everything from rice bottle launches to balloon launches to radio broadcasting. And all of these methods are really important. For example, we do the daily radio broadcast. It can be heard by anybody in North Korea, but not everybody has a shortwave radio. We have the balloon launches, but it can't reach all the northern areas. We have the rice bottle launches, but that's reaching the shorelines. So all these methods are important. And the defectors do tend to fight among themselves, saying, my way is better than your way. Balloons are more important than radio. Radio is more important than balloons. But actually, they're all important. So we try to help create partnerships between freedom-loving people and the defectors to support their work. So let me go through very quickly, some of the things that we're doing. First up, by air, balloon launches. There's about 10 organizations in North Korea. There's 10 organizations founded by North Korean defectors that have been involved in balloon launches. The one that most people know about is Fighters for Free North Korea Radio, headed by Park Sung-hak. Now, he's pretty much the most controversial because he's been very public about these balloon launches, and he's obviously on the assassination list by the Kim regime. But I just want to point out that one of the reasons for that is that he's been sending in leaflets like this, which implicate the regime in the death of Otto Warmbier, and that's why the regime is so against him, because he's been highlighting the crimes against humanity, the murder of the family members of the Kim family by Kim Jong-un, the murder of Otto Warmbier by that regime. So that's one of the reasons why the regime reacts to him so strongly. But I believe that what he's doing is very important, because he's also sending in leaflets like this. And this particular leaflet that Park Sung-hak sent in was about trying to find South Korean POWs, trying to get information. But we've also sent in excerpts from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We've also sent in, shortwave radios, US $1 bills, all kinds of things that are getting in there. Choco pies. Choco pies is another popular item to send into North Korea. So it's really important to use methods like that. And they've also sent in money, US $1 bills, which have helped. A US $1 bill can help feed a family for a week, a family of 4 in North Korea. And I want to point out that even though these balloon launches have been controversial, they're actually based on a program known as Operation July, which is the word truth that the American military established back during the Cold War. So it's been a proven and tried method. And another reason why we know it's effective is that we know that Rodong Shimun and Yurikim and Kozi, which is the propaganda websites of North Korea, constantly complain about these balloon launches. And we also know by anecdotal evidence that a lot of these North Korean defectors saw the leaflets. And that's why they are risking themselves to go out and do this, because they themselves were impacted. They saw the leaflets and it influenced them. Chung Kwan-il, another North Korean defector who heads no chain, was actually successful in getting information in by air through using drones at the border. Now, obviously, because of COVID, that's not a method that's been able to be applied now. But he got to a point where he was actually getting in USBs, the information in to North Korea by using drones. So by land, something that became very popular was the no-tell. And the no-tell was originally smuggled in by the North Korea People's Liberation Front, NKPLF, which was former North Korean military. The no-tell is like a little mini computer. It became so popular in North Korea that the regime had to decriminalize it, okay? So many no-tells got in, it was so popular, the regime had to decriminalize it, so it spread widely in North Korea. And it was very versatile because you could use a CD, you could play a CD, an SD card, and USBs, and you could actually connect it to watch the television. So the North Korean people and KPLF also started to send in micro SD cards with South Korean pop songs and Korean music, K-pop music, which could be inserted into the cell phones. And that led to the North Korean regime to, with their cell phones, is to prevent any being manufactured with an SD card, because North Koreans were using the SD cards to trade information, whether it was Korean soap operas or K-pop or whatever. We see this is happening where the defectors develop some really magnificent way to get information in, and then the regime reacts. So another thing that they did was they also did cell phones, shortwave radios that look like cell phones. And the NKPLF also started smuggling these in so that the North Korean people could have these shortwave radios, and it looks like a cell phone, so it would protect them from getting arrested. This manufacturing this was only $35, and you can imagine the power of information for somebody having one of those. So by sea is another method, and this is another one that's gotten a lot of attention, but rice bottles. This is something that was developed by the North Korean defectors, again, by a defector who'd served in the military and used to go along the shoreline of Hwanghae province. And he noticed there's a lot of South Korean trash washing up on Hwanghae province. So he realized when he got to freedom in South Korea, he realized that this was a tremendous method to get things in. So they send these rice bottles in, and you see here there's a Bible, there's a $1 bill, there's also some medicine, and there's also a USB, an SD card that has information. So that's another technique that's been used. And some of the defectors that have been doing that include Kim Young-hwa with the North Korean Refugees Human Rights Association, Park Jun-oh, who's the brother of Park Sung-hak, and Jang Sang-il. And Jang Sang-il developed a technique where he used a balloon that had the picture of Kim Jong-un on it, and he put information in the balloon, and he floated it in also by sea. The North Korean soldiers couldn't fire on the balloon because it had Kim Jong-un's face on it. So that, again, who would come up with that except for a defector? So all these methods have been very important. Cell phones, I want to mention about the importance of cell phones. There's an Egyptian company, Orascom, that established the first cell phone network in North Korea. And it was now CoreLink, which Orascom is 75% owned, is 75% invested in CoreLink. But CoreLink, by 2011, they had estimated that 94% of the population of North Korea has ability to use the cell phones. And they became widespread and popular. Now, it's important to know these cell phones only are information inside North Korea. It's a controlled system so that you can't dial outside the country. But it's important because you can still, they still use this as a method of getting information, but it's a closed system, just like the internet. They have an intranet. It's completely closed and controlled by the regime. So one of the other things the defectors came up with was getting Chinese cell phones into North Korea. So for example, if you wanted to get in touch with your loved ones, you would get a Chinese cell phone, you would get it to a broker. The broker would take that across the border, give it to your loved one would go to the top of a mountain and call you. And that's another way they were getting information in, by getting a lot of these Chinese-made cell phones into North Korea. And right now we're getting information out all the time from North Korea. The North Korean defectors are getting information out all the time. We get documents all the time because people in North Korea want to share this information. Another effective method that was utilized that the Moon government stopped was the loudspeakers. The South Korean government used to have a program of broadcasting information from the loudspeakers. It might be just South Korean programs, it might be K-pop music, but they used to do that. And it's very important to note that 70% of the North Korean ground forces and 50% of the air and naval forces are within 100 kilometers of the DMZ. So that is a very effective way to reach the North Korean military. And a lot of those soldiers that were posted there at the DMZ eventually go home and tell their families about the information they heard on the loudspeakers. That's why the Kim Jong-un regime demanded that the loudspeakers be shut off. So I know I only have a few minutes left, but I want to close by talking about the radio broadcast. That's probably the thing I'm most involved in. I encourage support for all these things, whether it's rice bottle launches or balloon launches, but the radio broadcast is the thing I'm most involved in. It's a unique partnership. Americans support 100% of the shortwave transmission costs of the Free North Korea Radio, but Free North Korea Radio, the programs are entirely produced by North Korean defectors. And even though we are totally privately funded, we're outperforming every other broadcaster into North Korea. And I believe it's simply because it's North Koreans that are doing the program. And if you're going to risk your life to listen to a radio broadcast, you're going to want to listen to people you know that are North Koreans. And I love VOA and RFA and KBS and SBS. And I think the more information going to North Korea is great, but it's important to have a defector-based radio station as well that's getting information in. And I know I'm out of time. I have my little timer here, Tomiko, so you don't have to, but I want to close by just saying we're in a very difficult period right now because the Moon government is doing the bidding of the Kim regime. And every time the Kim regime demands something be stopped, the Moon government responds. Moon Jae-in is doing everything he can to help the Kim Jong-un regime. He's trying to shut down the voices of the North Korean defectors. He's trying to arrest people for doing rice bottle launches and balloon launches. He's now working to try to shut down the radio broadcasting. So there isn't a greater time for anybody who lives in freedom to partner and help the North Korean defectors. They really need us now more than ever. And as we always say, the truth will set them free. The truth will set them free. We need to spread the truth to North Korea. That's the most important thing. And we need to help the defectors be able to do that. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Scholte. Thank you so much. So interesting, and I forgot even to look at the time. I know so many ways you have tried. Some time ago, many years ago, when I went to 38 parallels, what I heard was, if wind is coming from north, we hear big speaker coming from North Korea. It's hard to tell what they're saying, but that's another way. I know we heard something, and we call this a pumpkin village over there at it's called the Bridge of No Return, something like that. But it's really amazing over the years how you learned and developed a most effective way to really disseminate and tell them the truth. That is a really strong, the fact that truth set people free. Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to give a big applause to everybody. So thank you so much for your presentation. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Larry Moffett, Secretary General of the UPF, to take some of questions. Larry Moffett, the floor is yours. Unmute, Larry Moffett.
Okay, so much for my dramatic opening. Wow, what presentations. This is quite amazing. People, I guess, have found out how to reach me, and I got questions and things in on my cell phone more than came in on chat window. I'm going to try to get a little something out of everybody. I'd like to start with Dr. Ward. Tom, I was with you in Korea when you were there and you're on the tarmac when we were getting ready to jump on the plane, and ICORD said, you need to stay. And I didn't hear that conversation, but I noticed you stayed behind. I at the time, I thought you had tried to take towels from the hotel again, but you stayed, and you didn't really know exactly why you were staying, but apparently that was sort of revealed to you during your time there in your prayer and your intuition and your earnestness to find out. So a couple of things. First, what specifically was your reason for staying behind? How long were you there? What specifically was your reason for turning to your guides and saying, you know, I need to stay here. Can you ask them to keep my room open? And also, Reverend Moon was from the late 50s to the time he died in 2013, was the foremost anti-communist in the world. He was communist, anti-communist, numero uno. And didn't Kim Il-sung actually try to kill him at some point, send some people to South Korea to say a little about that? And don't you find it terribly ironic that he would be the one that would be holding hands with Kim Il-sung and trusted by him? So that's a lot to put on your plate. But first, tell me a little bit about staying behind. Then tell me a little bit about the attempt on Reverend Moon's life by Kim Il-sung and why the world's biggest anti-communist became blood brothers, so to speak?
Well, first of all, in terms of my staying there, as you know, Larry, it was not easy to have a cohesive group among those of us who were there, because a decision was made when we spoke with President Kim Il-sung that there'd be only one spokesperson. We were about 60 people. You had a deputy director, former deputy director of the CIA. You had a number of
Right.
state government officials, just a remarkable group of people.
Yeah.
But only one person spoke, and that caused a lot of, afterwards people felt, well, we all should have been able to share our views. We all should have been able to have exchanges. And I think the main purpose of us being there was lost, which was basically to focus upon abusive language. And the idea was to try to come up with some kind of a communique that would deal with that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't happen. And I was asked to stay, and that's what I was asked to work on. So I did interface particularly with the foreign ministry during the time I was there. And I did help to develop a communique, which talked about some things that shouldn't be said on each side. And I put it together, and the foreign ministry said that it was good, but it apparently was not good enough. And a decision was made, I think, among themselves to do something else, which had the same impact, which was to end Hate America Month. So that was what was decided instead. And I think it was a great idea on the part of the North Koreans to do that. I think it was a powerful statement. So anyway, that's what I was there for. In terms of assassination attempts on Reverend Moon, probably the most important assassination attempt on Reverend Moon was in 1988 by Yu Kikimura, who was a member of the Japanese Red Army, and he was arrested on the New Jersey Turnpike. The headquarters of the Japanese Red Army was in North Korea. That's where they trained, that's where they did things, and that's where this unquestionably North Korea had its fingerprints on that particular effort. So anyways, the FBI stopped this Japanese gentleman, who's probably about 40 years old, and they searched, and he seemed suspicious. They searched his car, and in his car, they found a number of very, very lethal weapons and bombs and everything else. And in addition to that, they also found a list of targets. And one of the targets on the list was Reverend Sun Myung Moon. They had his address and things like that. This person had his address and everything. And the FBI reported that to Reverend Moon's staff that basically, you're a target for this. So that was that happened in 1988. Yeah. But it was around that time that basically I think Reverend Moon really felt it's time. Now is the time to be able to reach out both to the Soviet Union and to reach out to North Korea. And by the way, Mr. Larry Muffet played a very important role in terms of reaching out to North Korea. If I'm not, quote me if I'm wrong, Larry, but I believe you were asked together with Antonio Betancourt to go to the North Korean embassy in Moscow after the Moscow program that you oversaw. Mr. Muffet also played a very important role along with Tomoko Duggett in terms of this program that was held between our movement and the Soviet Union. And a number of it's called Taz. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the Russian publishing. No, it was Novosti Press Agency. Novosti. I'm sorry, Novosti Press Agency. And anyways, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe you visited the North Korean embassy.
Actually, it was Antonio, because Antonio was a Colombian national, and he could rent a black car and drive up to the North Korean embassy, whereas as an American, I could not.
I see.
So just Antonio went, and the rest is history there.
Yes. So anyways, that basically Reverend Moon had a really strong feeling about the fact that this was the time to reconcile and not deal with you did this and you did this and you did this, but basically, look, I forgive everything. Blood is thicker than water. Let's forget about the past. Let's focus upon the future. You're my brother. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help. How can I help? And basically, that really moved the hearts of the Koreans. And by the way, that has continued onward. If you visit the home of Dr. Hak Han Moon, you'll see that there are these two cute little dogs there. They actually came from North Korea, basically as a gift a few years back. So that relationship is still there. It's one of the few, I think outlets really that North Koreans feel they can talk to, they can trust. Reverend Moon won their trust, you know, and that I think that's the important piece through all of this process. And that's one of the key issues always in resolving conflicts is something called ripeness. Ripeness is when basically people can be able to begin to speak freely. And I think that Reverend Moon was successful in a certain dimension in opening those doors. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're not naive. We're not naive. There's a lot of work to be done. But he played a very key role in opening a door which just was not there before.
It's amazing. It's amazing what happened. I'm going to move along very quickly. I wish I had a lot more time to spend on that. Mr. Saperna, you're our Muslim here, and you are so universal. In the time that I've known you, you are so such a man of God that radiates in 360 degrees. I don't think of you as any particular kind of label, but I know that technically you are a Muslim because of your relationship with the Orange County Islamic Society. Is there a Muslim track 3 going on anywhere? I know you talked about an interfaith approach. Is there even an interfaith approach being led by the Muslims? Can you say just a couple of words about that?
You pretty much mentioned it with respect to unification of North and South Korea.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, as far as our community is concerned, we do have a segment of our community who, in a way, have a kind of thinking that I have, a very universal and interfaith-oriented, multicultural, but majority are not. That's why it's extremely important to shed light on this issue and make sure that a lot of the people in our communities, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Hindus, and so forth, that they all fully aware of what Universal Peace Federation and all the leaders are doing, and hopefully be able to spread the message and bring them aboard. And as I had mentioned before, if we can establish some kind of an app that people of all faiths, of all cultures, especially from North and South, who can actually come in on a particular area on the internet, on the app, where people be able to communicate with each other and establish friendship and relationship. Because ultimately and inevitably, when the time of unification comes, a lot of the people from the North and South, which are going to be integrated, we need to lay that path, if you will, for them to prepare for this thing, so it won't be some kind of a shock for them. As far as our community is concerned, we have our own issues. We have a lot of our own internal and external situations that we're trying to deal with. But thank God, things are moving towards the right direction. By the grace of God, things are falling in place. Things are going well. And I believe this process of unification of North and South can be an excellent example for other nations to see and to follow. Because to develop this unity among the people, it requires sacrifice. You have to be willing to work hard, and you have to be willing to have an open heart and an open mind, rather than being narrow-minded, if you will, but rather coming together, and hopefully by the grace of God, this very short time that we are on earth, with respect to that we have used this opportunity that we have to at least be able to achieve a monumental step in trying to hopefully unite North and South, which the legacy of that obviously goes to Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon. God bless them both. But as I mentioned, they already laid this foundation. They already spread the seed. It's time for us to go in and to sow our seeds. Amen.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Frank. Dr. Suzanne Schulte, you are obviously a committed woman of faith, and you've run into some roadblocks in North Korea. You know, I remember back in the 60s, Billy Graham talking about how the place where Christianity was most aflame was in Korea. And the first time I went over to Korea in the late 70s, we were driving in from the airport, and you'd see these red neon crosses on top of the places, because every neighborhood had a church. They were just like, that was the skyline there. Now it's a different kind of skyline. So what about the mitigating factor of Christianity in South Korea? Is that growing weaker? What is your hope for the continuation of your work?
Well, let me say that just to speak about North Korea's, the Christian, what Billy Graham and his wife was at school in Pyongyang. And that's why they have that connection to North Korea.
Mhm.
But it's shocking to many people to not, it's shocking when I say this to me, but Pyongyang was at one time known as the Second Jerusalem, the Oriental Jerusalem, because there was a revival in 1907 in Pyongyang that was described as the greatest manifestation of the Holy Spirit since the book of Acts. And it was incredible outpouring, and the growth of Christianity was amazing in Pyongyang. I believe that Kim Il-sung, I believe that Kim Il-sung saw the power of the Christian faith as a young man, because he was actually raised in a Christian family.
Mhm.
And it is a fact that half the signers of the Korean Declaration of Independence were believers.
Mhm.
Half the signers of the Korean Declaration of Independence were believers, were Christians. And even though Christianity was very, very small, maybe 15% of the population, that's a pretty overwhelming number.
Mhm.
But it was the Christians that were really fighting back against the Japanese colonizers and trying to preserve Korean culture. It was the Christian missionaries to the United States that were trying to fight against the Japanese colonizers. My personal view is that Kim Il-sung saw the power of the faith and perverted it for his own purposes. That's why he set himself up as a god, Kim Jong-un up as, Kim Jong-il up, his son is the Jesus figure, and then the Juche is a religion. The religion of North Korea is the Holy Spirit. And so he set up this Trinity that is a perversion of God. And I think that's why we see so much horrific things. This is the worst, most suffering people in the world today. And I think
Yes.
it's because of that,
Yeah.
because this is a direct attack
Mhm.
on a God of love. And the people in North Korea are slaves to that dictatorship. So I have great hope, because we find out that, I believe we're getting reports now that the church was never wiped out in North Korea. The underground church has continued. And we are hearing stories of revival of the church in North Korea. We've heard that there were Christmas presents delivered to people during Christmas. We're getting all kinds of reports out of what's happening, that God is really moving in North Korea. He is really moving. And so I believe in the power of prayer, that Dr. Stallings told about the power of prayer. I absolutely believe that that is because so many people like Dr. Stallings have been praying for the people of North Korea, and God is on the move there. Most of the leaders of all these defector groups I was just talking about, most of them are Christians. And it's easy for North Koreans to understand Christianity because they've been lied to. They understand the Trinity, and they're like, oh, Kim Jong-un isn't God. And, you know, they realize it's easy for them to kind of understand what God did for them. So anyway, I've gone on over answering that question, but it's very important. This is a life and death struggle over the fate of 23 million people that live under a demonic regime. But God's on the move.
Dr. Schulte, thank you so much for your very sincere answer and for your commitment, your deep commitment. And speaking of whom, brings us to my beloved brother, Archbishop George Augustus Stallings Jr., my priest, and now my rock and roll mentor. I want you to, you have led many delegations to the DMZ and looked out across there, and you've prayed many times, and you alluded to that and to the soft power of prayer. I want you to say a little bit about what soft power is and how does one wield that. But before you do that, you've been to the north, you've been to that DMZ many times. You've been into the Panmunjom village, everything like that. You're a very perceptive man, very sensitive to the spirit and to the environment. I want you to kind of recall for us as vividly as you can the very first time you went to the DMZ, and what is your sharpest, most acute impression of that time?
Thank you very much, my beloved and esteemed brother, Larry. All of this never would have transpired in my life if I had never encountered the Reverend Dr. Sum Young Moon and his beloved wife, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. My whole world, Dr. Schulte, my whole world went into a new orbit. I had never ever visited Asia, even though as a Roman Catholic priest, I did my theological studies near the Vatican at the Pontifical University of Gregorian and St. Thomas Aquinas, living adjacent to the Propaganda Fide house where young men from Africa studied for the priesthood, and they were right next to the Vatican. So we were within earshot of the Vatican. Had the opportunity to visit all over Europe and parts of Central South America, but never to Asia. And the most powerful experience in my life came when I visited the 38th parallel on the Korean Peninsula. I had often heard about it. Born prior to the Korean War, as an infant, I didn't know anything about it, couldn't remember anything, just having learned about it as a lover of history. And seeing how people of the same race, culture, the biological connections between families in both the North and in the South of Korea, it struck me how a war can so separate and divide people of the same race and class and culture. And to know that in that painful separation, that line of demarcation, separating those people of the same race, culture, background, and knowing that, and meeting relatives in South Korea who had relatives in the North, and knowing that there was that great disconnect there really troubled me. I can remember very vividly going to that 38th parallel the first time, and we were chanting out words of peace and unity, and looking across the line. First of all, looking there at the border to the north and seeing those North Korean soldiers, they were like stone-faced and emotionless and just, their eyes of ice, it seemed, as they looked in our direction. Made me realize that the only way that this thing is going to really change is that we can not just engage in political or military diplomacy or intervention, but we're going to have to literally touch the hearts of men and women to bring about a change. And that's how I see track 2 and track 3, soft power diplomacy. I see it as it's not an appeal to political or military or legislative or judicial entities, but our direct appeal in using soft power diplomacy, our direct appeal is to the men and women of God, as Dr. Schulte talked about, who believe in the spiritual origins of humanity and understanding that common element that binds, a spiritual lineage that binds us together inextricably as brothers and sisters, children of the one universal God, and that we are all in this together. There's an expression that we use in, Dr. Frank, there's an expression that we use in the African diaspora coming from the motherland Africa on slave trips, on trade ships through the Middle Passage and coming to America. We have an expression in regards to all of the immigrants, whether they be African-American, Italian, German, Lithuanian, French, whatever. We may have come to these shores on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
Very well
We
put.
believe that we are in that same boat now with our brothers and sisters in North and South Korea. And when we see the reunification of the Korean Peninsula, we're gonna see peace brought to the Middle East between Jews and Muslims. We're gonna see when peace is achieved on that Korean Peninsula, I believe that is gonna unleash a wave of unity across the entire globe. And that's why Korea is so important to us. As Dr. Frank said, all of you have said it, that is the gateway to achieving peace in our world.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Archbishop. And now my dear sister, Mrs. Duggan, I gotta say, you really run a great webinar. I'm gonna send this back to
Thank
you.
you very much. We had a first-class presenters. I know listeners want to continue to hear it, everyone's wisdom and all kinds of method, way to bring peace. I still remember Mother Moon said, bringing peace demands that everyone invest sweat, tears, and sometimes even blood. That is why, even though we long for peace, we seldom achieve it. But she said, my husband, Reverend Moon, and I walked this way, this path, and are continuing on in. So we know, Archbishop Stallings, we are on the same boat. Thank you so much. We are truly one family under God. Let's see our dream come true. Imagine, dream will come. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our time went a little bit beyond. Thank you so much. Let's give her.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very
Have a
much.
good afternoon. Thank you. We'll see you.
Okay, bye.